Li Hao narrowed his eyes at the delicate gift from Zhao, a dragon horn comb and a small porcelain vial. Shaking the bottle lightly, he raised an eyebrow. Soul-casting elixir, Zhao quickly explained. For those in the divine travel, real mit enhances soul projection by 100 meters per pill, up to 10 pills total. Li Hao's lips curved slightly. So Wu Shuang would benefit. He acknowledged Zhao's thoughtfulness but didn't waver. Pills like these, while efficient, left subtle flaws in one's cultivation. In true martial clashes, those artificial gains could betray you. Unlike others, Li Hao couldn't even absorb them, and even if he could, he wouldn't. His uncle and Feng never relied on shortcuts. They favored spirit food energy rich, strengthening the body without corrupting the soul. They had no need for external aid. Li Hao gave Zhao a knowing look. The gift was appreciated, but his path remained unshaken, untainted by convenience, forged in silence. Zhao simply smiled, understanding this was never about the gift, but about trust. You've been back for years now, came the gentle reminder, voice low yet firm. If your heart still lingers on Wu Shuang's shadow, perhaps it's time you spent more moments with your cousin. She walks the path of Xianxia sect, know where support may shape your future. Li Hao nodded, smiling, his calm hiding deeper storms. Behind him, old Zhao followed, eyes carrying decades of loyalty and quiet judgment. Just then, a familiar voice echoed from afar Li Yuanzhao, striding into the mountain and river courtyard as if it still belonged to him. Zhao's face softened. In truth, the courtyard had grown quiet over the years. Other descendants keeping their distance from Li Hao, his once promising future dulled by rumors whispered like poison smoke from the northern Yan front. Whispers of failure, of deaths without honor, of power waning under imperial eyes. Even in a house built by generals, politics bled deeper than blades. But here came Yuan Zhao, smiling, unchanged. The dishes you want already sent to ants, he said, as if war and betrayal had never touched their world. Zhao's eyes flickered with surprise, not expecting Li Hao to be this composed, and a quiet relief softened his gaze. Thanks for the trouble, he murmured, just as Li Hao gave his shoulder a firm pat. Then let's head over, he said calmly, and Zhao nodded without hesitation. The two followed the young master, accompanied by the silent presence of Qingji as their carriage rolled out of mountain and river courtyard. When Li Yuanzhao suddenly requested a detour to Linglong Court, Li Hao agreed without question. The wheels turned toward the courtyard of his foster mother. Upon arrival, Yuanzhao leapt down, urging them to wait, vanishing through the gate. Moments later, he emerged escorting a woman of quiet grace, Xiao. Her presence held the weight of tragedy. Once a bride left alone on her wedding night, her husband claimed by war, never to return. With no child of her own, she had taken in Yuanzhao, raising him in silence. Inside the carriage, Li Hao's gaze turned distant as memories of childhood flickered off, being held in her arms, of a warmth long buried. But now, her expression was tight, eyes unreadable. In the shadows of the approaching banquet, none of them could guess the invisible threads tightening around their fates. Xiao Yujing narrowed her eyes, her tone laced with disdainful elegance as she scolded. It's not about whether she needs the gift, it's about dignity. You're representing our house, not tossing scraps to beggars. What will they say when they see you bring nothing but snacks? Her gaze snapped to the carriage, catching sight of a modest box. And this? What even is this? Zhao stammered, explaining it was prepared for another by his own concern, but Xiao Yujing scoffed, then turned sharply to Li Yuanzhao. See, you think others are sincere, but they dance circles around your naive heart. Empty-handed and clueless, what are you planning to offer your cousin? A smile? Li Yuanzhao's lips parted, eyes wide in innocence. But Zhao made it for Hao. It's not my fault. You! Her hand trembled midair, fury checked only by the presence of others. Forget it. Your mother's prepared one already. A maid stepped forward, delivering a box to the boy, who moved to open it but stopped at a single sharp glare from her eyes. Head bowed, he followed in silence. We'll take our own carriage, she said coolly to Zhao and Li Hao, brushing them aside like dust on silk. Mother, Li Hao murmured. Silence, she snapped, her words cutting sharper than any blade. Whether she needs it or not, your gifts must show dignity. Xiao Yujing's scorn dripped like frost, her eyes sharp as blades. If people see you offering scraps, won't they mock us behind silk fans? Her gaze swept to a corner of the carriage there. A simple box waited. And this? Is this your grand sincerity? Zhao, ever the old servant, scrambled to explain. It was for young Master Hao to offer Miss Shuang, not for. But Xiao Yujing cut him off with a scoff, turning her cold fire on Li Yuanzhao. You walk in circles, blind and foolish, while they plan behind your back. Her voice flared. You come with nothing. What will you present your empty hands? Li Yuanzhao shrank back, mumbling, but Zhao prepared it. I didn't know. You? Her palm trembled in fury, barely restrained, her breath sharp with frustration. If not for Li Hao and Zhao, I'd strike sense into you myself. She snapped her fan closed. Enough. Your mother already prepared a gift for you. A maid stepped forth, elegant and wordless, offering a finely wrapped box. Tempted to peek, Yuan Zhao flinched under his mother's glare, lips sealed, shadowed by shame. We'll ride in our own carriage, Xiao Yujing declared, not sparing Li Hao a glance. No need to crowd. Mother, Li Hao started, but her answer came swift and slicing. Be quiet. The wind whispered through the curtains, but no warmth followed. Is this conversation helpful so far? A sharp tension always lingered between him and his fourth mother, whose coldness never made sense to Li Yuanzhao until one day. Li Hao, sensing the discomfort, tried to diffuse the moment with a subtle wink before leaving with Zhao. Left behind, Yuanzhao turned to his mother, trying once again to understand her aversion to Hao, only to be cut off with a harsh glare and an even harsher truth. He started too late. You'd bring trouble upon yourself. Confused but unwilling to argue, Yuanzhao could only nod, the weight of her words sinking in like cold iron. Later, in the muted shadows of the carriage, Zhao whispered to Li Hao the truth unspoken in front of others. Madame Xiao's grief ran deep, the kind that turned into quiet blame after the fourth master fell in battle. And though none dared speak of it, her bitterness had long since taken root in the cracks of the Li family's silence. Li Hao's gaze sharpened as he stood before Eternal Spring Court, the air thick with layered loyalties and whispers behind fans. He had long sensed the bitterness that festered in Fourth Mother's heart, but unlike the false sweetness of the Second Mother from Shuihua Courtyard, at least Fourth Mother wore her resentment plainly. He felt no hatred toward her blade was visible, not hidden behind a smile. And as for Madame Xiao, whatever her past, she seemed to truly care for Li Yuanzhao, and that was enough. The moon had just crested the rooftops, spilling silver across the lantern-lit paths as laughter echoed from within the hall. Servants bowed low as Li Hao passed, Zhao's carefully wrapped gift in hand, stepping into a scene painted with warmth but edged with unspoken tension. And then, as the door opened, the flickering light caught a figure he had never seen before. Elegant, unfamiliar, dangerous. In that heartbeat, the laughter faded, and Li Hao felt the air still as if something had shifted, quietly, forever. Do you like this personality? No one foresaw that after just 2 years in the military, he would fall on the battlefield, leaving a wedding gown unworn and vows unspoken. The marriage dissolved before the incense could be lit. The Empire presumed the union ended with his death. After all, how could a royal princess become a widow before the wedding even took place? But she defied it all, her heart unmoved by time or expectation, vowing that, in this life, she would marry none other than the 9th son of the Li family. With his armor in hand and the Emperor's fury trailing behind, she journeyed alone to Qingzhou, completing the wedding ceremony in silence and sorrow. Thus was born the legend of 9th Madame Zhang Xian'er, whose love stirred even the coldest chambers of the palace. Her grace commanded not authority, but reverence. Even the proud 2nd and 5th masters of the Li clan bowed with genuine affection when they spoke her name. This was not about rank, but about devotion. When Li Hao heard the story for the first time, something old and unfamiliar stirred in him. In this era, a single heart could last a lifetime, untouched by time or temptation. Unlike his own world, where feelings changed faster than a flick of the finger across a glowing screen. 9th, Madame is too kind, said Li Wushuang gently. Zhang Xian'er's smile in return was like autumn sun cool, but warm enough to remember. At that moment, He Jianlan spotted Li Hao entering and beckoned him with a smile that softened the room. He returned the smile naturally, feeling more at peace beside her and 9th Madam than anywhere else. He approached the table, eyes catching dishes he had requested earlier, and handed over a small gift box. Wu Shuang's return deserves something special, he said lightly. I hope you like it, cousin. No one foresaw that after just 2 years in the army, he would fall on the battlefield, abruptly ending a marriage that was days from being sealed to tragedy, mourned by many. With his death, all assumed the royal engagement would dissolve, for how could a noble princess live as a widow? But she, bound by unshakable devotion, declared she would marry only the 9th son of the Li family in this lifetime. Defying court and custom, she traveled to Qingzhou, clutching his armor and robe, and completed the ceremony alone, becoming the 9th Madam in name and soul. Her vow turned legend, whispered through Qingzhou's streets like a poem of old. In the Grand Li household, even the elders lowered their voices in reverence when speaking her nomino for her status. But for the love she enshrined, when Li Hao first heard this tale, his heart stirred with unfamiliar weight. In this era, a single lifetime was enough to love and to remember only one. A stark contrast to his own time, where affections shifted with the swipe of a screen. 9th Madame is too kind, murmured Li Wushuang, her her aloof face softening in genuine respect. As Li Hao entered the hall, the matriarch's eyes lit up warmly. Come, sit down. Even Zheng Xian'er, cold to most, offered him a gentle, knowing smile. Feeling the warmth of the room, Li Hao smiled back, setting down the gift he brought. I heard Wu Shuang was returning. Just a little something. Hope you like it, cousin. Li Wuxia accepted the gift with an unreadable face, her fingers brushing the box as if it were no more than formality. Without pause, she moved to place it on the gift table. From the side, Liu Yurong's voice pierced the air with light-hearted teasing, curious why she wouldn't open it. Shuang-er, don't you wonder what Hao gave you? He rarely gifts anyone, she smiled. He Jianlan's tone remained calm, steady, as he offered a simple truth. The food Hao sends is made by his hands, that's gift enough. As soft agreement circled the room, Zheng Xian'er beckoned Li Hao to sit, her tone warm, her words evoking the sweetness of memories. If you like them, I'll make more tomorrow, Li Hao responded smoothly, his voice easy. Meanwhile, Wu Shuang hesitated. She hadn't cared to open it, but now, with the elders watching, indifference might look like offense. She opened it casually. A porcelain vial, a dragon horn cone. Her brows twitched. Common gifts, nothing rare. She almost shut the lid. Then came Lu Yue wrong again, laughter hidden beneath her words. The craftsmanship is fine, and what's in the bottle? Soul-casting elixir, Li Hao answered plainly. Wu Shuang's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. She closed the box with care and placed it aside, her voice cool as mountain wind. Do you think I need such pills? Her voice was soft, but it chilled the room like frost creeping over a warm cup of tea. The question hung in the air like a blade. Accepting the pills would imply weakness, rejecting them would make the gesture pointless. Li Hao hesitated, caught between courtesy and insult, his helpless sigh barely audible. Shuang-er, he began, only for Lady Gao to smooth things over with a polished smile, trying to douse sparks before they became flames. But then the quiet boy Li Yun stiffened, pride prickling like needles as he transformed before their Aishin high, tone sharp. My sister is a 9th grade warrior. She doesn't need such things. He snapped, eyes flashing with defiance. Li Hao stared at him, this foolish cub roaring at the wrong time, in the wrong place. Lose his temper now, and he would embarrass her, not himself. So he said nothing. But the tension was already a storm, rippling under smiles and silences, as the family's warmth began to crack beneath the weight of hidden truths and quiet pride. Zheng Xian'er leaned close to Li Hao, her voice honeyed with mischief. If Shuang-er doesn't like it, I'll make it up to you later, Hao. Liu Rong chimed in quickly, trying to soothe the tension. It's the thought that counts. Shuang-er said nothing, just placed the gift on the rack with casual disinterest. Then came the sound of footsteps, and Li Yuanzhao entered, calling out to Li Hao. The moment shattered Zhao Yujing's fragile calm, her son greeting someone else first. Furious, she masked her anger with a flawless smile and strode in, praising Shuang-er's beauty to shift attention away from her son's misstep. The hall returned to its polite hum, but Li Hao merely watched, amused at every word these women spoke was wrapped in thorns. Yuanzhao gave a knowing glance to Li Hao. Whatever had happened earlier was settled between brothers. He handed over a gift to Li Wuxia, who opened it despite a faint frown. Inside this dance of smiles and silence, everyone knew one thing. In this family, the real blades were hidden behind courtesy. Zheng Xian'er leaned close to Li Hao, her voice a playful melody. If Shuang-er didn't like it, I'll make it up to you later. Liu Yue Rong quickly echoed with soft urgency, it's the thought that matters. Shuang-er said nothing, her gaze cool, slipping the gift onto the rack like setting down a weight. Then came the footsteps. Li Yuanzhao's call broke the moment. Li Hao turned calm and unreadable as fourth mother entered beside Yuanzhao. But Xiao Yujing's eyes burned. Her son had greeted Li Hao first. The hall thick with watching eyes, she swallowed her fury, masked it with a glowing smile. So tall and beautiful now, Shuang-er Ching Ching, you've raised her well. The tension faded with the elegance of her lie. At the table, Li Hao simply smiled. None of these women were harmless. A glance from Yuanzhao told him all was still well between them. No rift had formed. With practiced ease, Yuanzhao handed his gift to Shuang-er. What is it? Yue Rong asked, curiosity tinged with wariness. Open it and see, Yuanzhao replied, ignorant of its contents but smooth with his answer. Shuang-er frowned, the weight of all their legacies pressing down, and opened it anyway. Do you like this personality? The blade gleamed coldly in the light. It wasn't just any dagger, but the fabled Han Shang, a weapon whispered to pierce even the flesh of immortal demon kings. Gao Qingqing's eyes widened as she recognized its name, stunned that such a divine relic now rested in the hands of Xiao Yujing, but the smile on Xiao Yujing's face held more warmth than pride. As long as Shuang-er likes it, that's enough, she said softly, brushing off its deadly legacy, as if it were merely a trinket gifted with affection. Gao Qingqing quickly turned to her daughter, her voice regaining calm. Well, thank your cousin properly. Li Wushuang, ever graceful, cradled the dagger as a quiet gleam lit her eyes. This was not just a gift, but a promise of survival. Though she wielded a sword, this dagger would serve as her unseen edge, deadly when distance collapsed. Thank you, cousin, she said, her voice like falling petals. Li Yuanzhao laughed it off and rejoined Li Hao, their camaraderie untouched by ceremony. Soon, the other ladies of the house arrived, but the gathering remained intimate. No unnecessary guests, no concubines from the side branches. He Jialan knew Wu Shuang's distaste for kraut. Among them came her father, Li Xuanli, emerging from Zen meditation mountain like a shadow from memory elegant despite old wounds, a man who had faced demons and lived to reflect it. The silence around him spoke of blood spilled and pride buried, for the battlefield does not spare the men of the Li clan. Those who survive are changed and never by choice. In the quiet hush of a family gathering, Li Xuanli returns home, bearing the weight of old battles and deeper scars, his presence both commanding and subdued. The air shifts as he acknowledges each relative with composed respect, finally turning to his daughter, Li Wushuang, whose calm response to praise reveals not pride, but a quiet yearning. She speaks of her humble rank on the Qian list, unintentionally invoking the memory of 9th Uncle Thi, once blazing prodigy, whose fall remains a wound stitched into the Li family's soul. For a breathless moment, silence settles like ash. Ghosts of childhood laughter echo faintly from the courtyard of their past, where siblings, once trained, laughed, and defied their father's wrath together. That world is gone. As the shadow of the 9th uncle's legacy looms, Li Xuanli's smile flickers past and present clash behind his eyes. But he catches himself, and with a soft, almost teasing tone, he breaks the spell. You wish to match your 9th uncle? You're still far too green. He was already shaking the heavens at 17. The weight of legacy is not in the blood, it's in the silence that followed. It tastes exactly like it did more than 10 years ago, she murmured, a rare softness flickering across her face. The cool and composed Li Wushuang momentarily dropped her aloofness, gently lifting the dish to her lips with curiosity and a hint of nostalgia. It's good, she smiled, for once letting her guard down. Across the table, Li Xuanli offered a warm chuckle. Eldest sister-in-law truly considered Shuang-Er's return. Bamboo fragrant dark dragon liver from Emerald Lake Courtyard, it's not easily forgotten. But He Jianlan shook her head with a faint smile, glancing at the silent youth focused intently on his food. Not me. It was Hao and Yuan Zhao. They remembered how long Shuang-Er's been away, and thought she might miss the taste of Qingzhou. Li Xuanli turned, surprised. You two bought this? Li Hao looked up, quietly nodding, the respect in his eyes unmistakable. Yuan Zhao chimed in with a grin. Uncle Hao's the true connoisseur. Everything you've complimented so far, all his picks. And there's more coming. Li Xuanli's expression shifted, recognizing the boy once dismissed as a cultivation cripple. He remembered attending the child's 100-day feast. Rumors had said the boy's meridians were broken, yet here he was, strong, thoughtful, and seemingly reborn. Perhaps someone had helped him, or perhaps he had risen on his own. But even so, the years lost could never be regained. A late start in cultivation meant falling behind forever. And yet, the quiet strength in the boy's gaze suggested otherwise. It's exactly the same. Just like over a decade ago, she murmured, savoring the familiar warmth of home on her tongue, the taste unchanging, timeless. A flicker of surprise broke through Li Wushuang's usual composure as she tilted her head and sampled the dish with cautious grace, then smiled, unguarded, for the first time in years. Across the table, Li Xuanli's eyes softened. Eldest sister-in-law truly remembered Shuang-Er's favorite, bamboo fragrant dark dragon liver only found in Qingzhou. I nearly forgot it myself. But he, Jianlan only chuckled lightly, brushing credit aside. Not me. Hao and Yuan Zhao brought it, they said. After so long away, Shuang-Er deserved a taste of home. A pause. Then realization struck Li Xuanli. You two? Li Hao, quiet and respectful, gave a small nod while Yuan Zhao grinned. Uncle, Hao's got the best taste among us. Everything you praised, he chose it all, and there's more coming. Eyes shifted toward the young boy once rumored to be a cultivation cripple, forgotten by many, but not broken. Perhaps late to start, but even so, a blade once buried may still draw blood under the right stars. Li Hao's quiet restraint spoke louder than words, as Uncle Five's voice softened with unexpected kindness, even hinting at Li Hao's father's imminent return. The tension in the air shifted. Shuang-Er was nudged to express gratitude, but Li Hao, sensing the subtle weight behind the gesture, chose grace over pride, letting the earlier moment pass unspoken. Yet across the table, Shuang-Er's cold glance betrayed her discomfort. His calm demeanor, Indifferent yet distant, unsettled her. Her reply cool, dismissive, pushing aside the dragon liver was sharp enough to cut the silence. But her father's expression darkened instantly. "What do you have against Hauer?" he demanded, no longer masking that he'd seen everything unfold. His voice carried not just anger, but disappointment, echoing through the dining hall like a blade drawn too quickly. Even the clatter of chopsticks ceased. In that instant, everyone felt it. This wasn't just about etiquette. It was the unspoken clash of blood, pride, and something far more dangerous simmering beneath the surface. The air froze like a blade's edge. Asking the girl to apologize now would only shatter her pride. He, Jianlan, sensed the shift and interjected softly. "Xuan Li, don't blame Shuang-er. She just returned. Shuang-er, do you have something to say about Hao?" Wu Shuang's heart clenched her father, scolding her for the first time since she came back. And not for her sake, but for someone else? She glared at Li Hao, eyes like stormlit steel. "Ask him. While I was away, he bullied my little brother. Father, you've been in seclusion, you wouldn't know." That revelation struck like a sudden thunderclap. Li Xuanli blinked, stunned. Li Hao? A bully? Li Yun's face shifted. Nerves surfaced. It had been a careless moment that told his sister, laughing, about a time Li Hao had hit him. It was meant as a joke, but now, with his sister returned like a vengeful spirit, the old wound opened wide. He'd always wanted to stand up to Hao, but never had the nerve. Wu Shuang had no such hesitation. Li Hao stood still, staring at the boy's anxious face. So he'd held a grudge all this time? Maybe he hadn't hit him hard enough back then. Li Yun's face turned crimson, not from fury but humiliation. Back then, he had never defeated Li Hao, who had outmatched him in every way. "I was careless," he muttered, grasping for pride. "He ambushed me, and he was stronger." His voice faltered as stifled laughter spread through the Halaveri One, remembered the days when Li Hao, untrained in cultivation but tempered in body refinement, had easily put him down. It was a bitter tale, whispered through clenched teeth, now exposed in front of family thanks to a letter to his sister unseen in years. "Tch, it's because you were obsessed with Hao's fiancé," someone hissed, drawing a chilling glare from Mother Three's silent words etched in her gaze. "Shut your mouth." Patriarch Li Xuanli's eyes narrowed. "Useless, brat. If you have a grievance, settle it with fists in the training yard, not behind your mother's robes. You're a grown man, act like one." His scolding struck harder than any blow, leaving Li Yun trembling with shame. But before the room could boil over, Gao Qingqing sighed and shifted the focus. "How? When is your fiancé returning? I'd like her to spar with Shuang-er when she does." With a calm smile, Li Hao answered, "Shuer will return in half a year." Just like that, the tension cracked, and the room flowed into lighter talk. Swear's talent, her 9th grade combat body, the promise she held. Laughter returned, the past tucked away like dust beneath silk. Li Yun's face burned red, not just from shame but from the weight of an old defeat he never lived down. Back then, he had been crushed by Li Hao, who hadn't even begun proper cultivation. "He ambushed me and was stronger," he muttered, eyes low, trying to preserve what pride he had left. The others stifled laughter. How could a martial artist lose to someone still in body refinement? They knew the truth. Li Yun, obsessed and reckless, had lost more than a duel he lost face. His silent complaints to his sister, long absent, only made things worse. Then came the careless jab. "It's 'cause you were hung up on Hao's fiancé." Li Yuanzhao snapped only to be silenced instantly by his mother's deadly stare. The room tensed. Li Xuanli's voice cut through it, harsh and cold. "You call yourself a man, whining to your sister over a sparring loss? Settle it with fists, not complaints." Li Yun shrank further, humiliated anew. But Fifth Lady, sensing the wound had festered long enough, turned to Li Hao with a smile. "Speaking of which, when is your fiancé returning? The Sword Saint's disciple should spar with Shuang-er." "Calm as still water," Li Hao replied, "in about half a year." The mood lightened. The women chimed in with fond memories of Shuer, her 9th grade combat body, her talent. The sting of Li Yun's shame faded beneath the gentle current of new conversation like dust swept under silk. Li Hao, calm and composed, shared easy laughter with the women at the table, his presence like still water hiding deep tides. Li Yun, cheeks tinged red, sneaked glances at their father no longer stern, now smiling faintly while engaged in quiet conversation with Li Hao. Relief crept into Li Yun's chest, yet a subtle ache of inadequacy lingered. Then, a gentle touch under the table his sister, Li Jining, offering a dish with a soft smile. That simple warmth settled his heart. Across the room, Gao Qingqing's gaze swept from the ever-steady Li Hao to her own son, and a sigh stirred in her chest. Li Hao, despite his late start in cultivation, still shone too brightly. Lu Yue Rong, with a pleasant voice hiding measured intention, asked about Shuang-er's future now that she'd returned home with glory. Unbothered, Shuang-er glanced at her younger cousin across the table, calmly redirected her chopsticks midair, and answered between bites that she only wished to spar with Chan Feng. Her casual words slipped past the crowd like a breeze unnoticed, yet unchallenged. Still smiling, Lu Yue Rong replied that Xian Feng was soon to return, and a match would be arranged. Back in the day, you and Tiangang used to chase each other around the courtyard. The words sparked a flicker in Li Xuanli's eyes, but he quickly masked it with a faint smile. Please, let's not speak of such foolish childhood things, he said, brushing off the past like dust from an old robe. As the feast at Eternal Spring Court dwindled and shadows lengthened, the dishes bought and cooked, remembered or not were, all consumed, their warmth fading with the night. Li Hao, ever distant, made no effort to claim credit, nor did he intend to ever offer such gestures again. A single dragon liver was enough. When the time came, perhaps a ceremonial gift would suffice, nothing more. With the banquet over, guests drifted away without conflict. Li Hao returned quietly to mountain and river courtyard, while Li Xuanli, surrounded by wife and children, walked back to Piaoshu courtyard. Yet peace was short-lived. On a narrow moonlit path, his wife pulled him aside, her voice sharp with hurt. How could you say that at the table? They're both your children, Li Xuanli faltered, his reply as brittle as frost. They were in the wrong, and Yunair so timid, he'll never rise. Shuang-er may be stronger, but too reckless, even with her cultivation. His wife's eyes burned. She protects her brother. Isn't that what family means? The wind stirred the leaves, carrying no answer, only silence between them. Gao Qingqing snapped, irritation flaring like a sudden flame, but Li Xuanli only chuckled softly, conceding, "You're right!" Speechless, Qingqing scowled. Li men truly were all the same. Insufferable brutes. Sensing the storm behind her silence, Li Xuanli sighed. How could I criticize Hao-er, he murmured, eyes distant. 14 years ago, when our seventh brother returned victorious from war, I was still recovering from wounds. Northern Yan should have been mine to manage, but fate chose him. He and Qingqing endured trials we can't fully grasp. How could I judge his son? Qingqing knew he made sense, yet her silence grew heavier. Li Xuanli pressed on. And Hao-er, that child's done no wrong. You saw him, his calm, his grace, his way with the elders. So composed. If only he could cultivate, even Shuang-er might not compare. Qingqing's anger dulled for a moment, flared once more at the comparison. Then go cherish your perfect Hao-er. She snapped, turning on her heel, sleeves flying like storm clouds, and disappeared indoors. Li Xuanli stood rooted, blinking. What did I say now? He whispered, baffled. Elsewhere, at Shuahua Courtyard, Lu Yue Rong slammed her palm on the table, fury flashing. That girl dares challenge Qian Feng for the true dragon seat? The nerve of someone destined to be married off? She doesn't realize her own limitations yet. She dares to dream beyond them. As the girl mentioned sparring, Lu Yue Rong saw through the surface. This wasn't about training. Her return was too timely, too calculated. The true dragon seat, once dominated by male heirs for generations, had known a female, only once-sea woman who never married, who ruled the clan's fate and rode into legend as Daeyu's famed commander. Could this young miss truly believe she could follow such a path? A divine travel realm? Ha! Laughable. Lu Yue Rong's smirk deepened. But behind her, the old housekeeper walked in silence, burdened by sorrowful eyes. The unity that once defined the 9 courtyards had fractured. A quiet shift that began after the deaths of the eldest and third sons of the Li family. Since then, joy had withered. The next morning, Li Hao waited quietly on horseback. Behind him, hooves approached. "How, bro?" came the cheerful call of Li Yuan Zhao. They rode off together toward Tan Palace, unaware that beneath polite words and fading traditions, ambition was stirring and the blood of dragons never forgets. Do you like this personality? Almost stuffed, huh? Bro, my mom's sharp words don't take them to heart. But Li Hao just waved it off. No need to talk like that between brothers. Of course, no blame, no fuss. That's why Li Yuan Zhao always admired him broad-minded as ever. Thinking back to last night's banquet, Li Yuan Zhao chuckled. Everyone was singing praises for cousin Wu Shuang. Yet none of them knew Li Hao's cultivation had already soared far beyond hers. Why didn't he say anything? Li Hao, with a lazy tug on the reins, smiled lightly. What's the point? Stealing a kid's spotlight? That's too childish. Li Yuan Zhao laughed out loud. Yeah, that's the Li Hao he knew. Steady, calm, never one to chase applause. If cousin heard she's called a kid, she'd probably blow up. You're a kid too. How, bro, you. Ha ha. Li Hao's laughter rang out, light and free. But soon, the truth of his cultivation would spread to Auntie and the others. Li Hao? He didn't care. Once Fu returned from Kangyu City, word would get out anyway. The calm before the storm shatters as the quiet roads of Kangyu tremble beneath the hooves of the Red Blood Horse. Though the demon calamity has yet to stain Qi State, trouble brews silent. Li Hao halts mid-path, eyes narrowing as a figure cloaked in snow white waits beneath the trees Li Wushuang. Her glare cuts colder than steel. You humiliated my brother. Tonight, I return the favor. Li Yuanzhao's voice stammers in defense, but she silences him with a single glance. Li Hao exhales, weary of familial grudges that refuse to die. As dusk bleeds across the horizon, swords remain sheathed for now, but the air crackles with tension. In a clan where silence weighs more than words, vengeance doesn't knock, it waits. Li Hao smirked atop his steed. I spanked your brother. You gonna spank me too? Li Wushuang's eyes turned cold as frost. Not your butt, I'll slap that smug mouth. In a flash, she surged forward, but Li Hao's body leaned like water, hand rising, redirecting her strike with effortless grace. Her momentum betrayed her. In an instant, she was pinned to the horse's back by an invisible force, her cultivation realm completely suppressed. Try that again and I won't be so polite, Li Hao muttered, his hand delivering sharp retribution. Her fury burned, but the weight of his power left her helpless. You talk about revenge, he said, voice low and cold. But back then, I was too merciful. Her scream echoed under the cracked sky, but like her brother before her, all she could do was curse as a dozen fierce slaps rang out, shaking both pride and soul. Is this conversation helpful so far? Li Wushuang, though strong enough to endure, couldn't hide the sharp sting that made her bite her lip, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. Let me go, she snarled, struggling fiercely as her divine soul burst out in defiance, only to be mercilessly shoved back into her body by Li Hao's unrelenting soul force, locking her completely. Still so stubborn? Li Hao's voice dripped with cold disdain. You bastard, she spat, but her words were slapped away as Li Hao's palm struck again and again. The sound of muffled sobs halted his hand. Beneath his palm, the proud daughter of heaven so aloof, so untouchable just yesterday, was now trembling. Her face streaked with tears, her ethereal pride shattered like falling mist. Convinced now? Li Hao asked softly, his hand finally still. Lying limply over the horse's back, Li Wushuang refused to answer, her silence speaking louder than words as tears slid silently down. Li Hao's eyes narrowed with a mocking grin. If you're still not convinced, I might just strip you bare, seal your power, and hang you on this tree for all to see. Her wide, horrified gaze shot up. Could a person really say such things? Weren't they cousins? Even Li Yuanzhao, standing aside, was stunned, but couldn't hide the faint spark of amusement in his eyes. Li Hao, of course, never intended to cross the line. It was pure, ruthless intimidation. I'll count to 3, his smirk deepened. You wouldn't dare! As Li Wushuang struggled to straighten her back, her once proud presence now hunched in humiliation. A flicker of pity stirred in Li Hao's heart. Just yesterday, he'd admired Hera cousin raised under the tutelage of a renowned master, someone he once saw as a distant star. But now, facing her fury, her words biting, "Don't give me your cold comfort," he remained silent. The tension cracked like thunder between them, her pride smoldering under the weight of defeat. Were you hiding your strength all along, she demanded, voice sharp with disbelief and shame. His response was like a sword to the heart. If it had been someone else, you'd be dead by now with how careless you are. Her rage trembled on the edge of explosion. She had returned not for reconciliation, but to seize destiny to claim the title of true dragon and restore her place in the clan. Yet now, after her bitter loss, all she could do was seethe in silence as Li Hao passed her by, reins flicking, leaving only dust in his wake. You? She snarled, fists clenched, her ambition bruised but not yet broken. Li Wushuang's body trembled with rage, her pride crumbling under the weight of defeat. Once hailed as the prodigious disciple under a legendary master, she had returned home with dreams of rising as the true dragon heir, carrying the ambition to lead the Li family alone unmarried, unyielding, unmatched. But Li Hao, with nothing more than a flick of his reins and a glance colder than steel, shattered that resolve in a single encounter. Her fury burned, teeth clenched, eyes burning holes through the road he rode past on. Don't give me your cold comfort. She snapped at Li Yuanzhao, though his words had held no malice, only stunned confusion at the storm he'd unwittingly stirred. Every word from Li Hao felt like a blade, each truth sharper than the last. If it were someone else today, you'd already be dead. No gentleness, no mercy, just brutal reality. And as the red blood horse carried him forward, leaving her behind in silence and shame, Wushuang stood frozen, torn between lashing out and collapsing inward, knowing that today's defeat was more than just bruises. It was the crumbling of everything she believed she was destined to become. She possessed countless cultivation arts and the guarded secrets of Xianxia sect. Yet before the sheer force of the 15 Li realm, she was no more than a paper doll unable to move, unable to resist. Without stepping into that realm herself, no technique could bridge the chasm between them, no pride could be reclaimed. As the two boys rode away, the flames of humiliation burned in her eyes, only to be doused by a realization more cutting than any blade. He was only 14 and already surpassed the record held by the invincible figure she once idolized. Her breath caught, her body stung. A bloom of blood marked the fabric beneath her trembling hand. Teeth clenched, eyes red, she stood alone in a storm of shame and awakening. How? Wasn't that too much? Came the soft concern beside the galloping hooves. But Li Hao's voice was cold as stone. If I was harsh, it was mercy. Flattery breeds blindness. Even a pig can fly if praised long enough. His words sliced deeper than any strike meant not to wound, but to shatter illusions. Because out there, in the cruel world beyond family halls and legacy names, no one would catch her if she fell. He couldn't help but admire Li Hao even more. How? I've noticed you always seem to stand with the older generation, the boy remarked, but Li Hao's steady glance said that all his soul had walked through 2 lifetimes. His spirit aligned with those far beyond his years, never truly seeing these people as peers. It wasn't arrogance, it was simply who he was. As they headed to Tan Palace Academy, the divine general mansion burst into a frenzy. In her quiet courtyard, the girl returned, tending to old bruises with childhood medicine, her frustration with Li Hao deepening, though a tangled web of respect and doubt now stirred inside her. She thought, had his cultivation secret already spread? But the news wasn't about him. Stepping outside, she learned it was the return of the Northern Yan war hero, a name that ignited the hearts of Qingzhou. The Li family, legends carved in stone and enshrined in 4 martial temples, carried a legacy etched into the city's bones. 6 brothers lost in battle, 14 years drenched in war, a demon-slaying record that filled 3 volumes. This was no ordinary return. 30 li from the city, the victorious army approached, and before they even crossed the gates, the streets pulsed with life. Market stalls were abandoned, food and wine carried by trembling hands, as the people of Qingzhou surged forward, not out of duty, but out of burning reverence for the silent, undefeated commander. Your father, Lord Marshal Valor, has returned in triumph. The words echoed like thunder through Shen Yunqing's trembling voice. And in Qingzhou City, where the Li family's name weighed heavier than law, such news struck deeper than steel. Li Hao froze. Father? Memories flickered like scattered embers, 14 years buried. A childhood lost, a name remembered only in shadow. He bowed in thanks, then soared into the sky, cutting through wind and cloud. Shen Yunqing watched the boy disappear, beard trembling, eyes shining. This generation's true dragon, even fiercer than the last. From Tan Palace to the city gates, Li Hao raced, blood pounding in rhythm with the red blood horse beneath him. Hooves cracked the cobblestones, startled citizens parting like waves before a tide, and then at the road's edge banners. Dust, and a silhouette astride a dragon lion. Father and son met in silence, one astride battle-forged majesty, one on a blood-red steed. In that single glance, history uncoiled. On the wind, the breath of destiny stirred. Your father, Lord Marshal Valor, has returned in triumph. Shen Yunqing's voice trembled with excitement as the winds of Qingzhou whispered of the Li family's power. Li Hao froze. 14 years of silence unraveled, and in instant memories clawing their way back from the abyss. His heart surged, not just with surprise, but something deeper forgotten warmth. Lingering ache. After a quick bow, he soared skyward, a comet streaking toward destiny. Shen Yunqing, watching the youth vanish, murmured, "This true dragon surpasses even legend." At Tan Palace's gates, Li Hao shattered the stable doors, mounted the red blood horse, and thundered into the streets. Hooves echoed like war drums as the people parted in awe. When he reached the official road, he saw it banners fluttering like flames, and atop a dragon lion. A towering figure rode, eyes locked on the boy charging through fate. The moment stilled. Father and son, dragon and steed. Recognition flashed. Silence roared. And in that eternal second, the fire long buried in bloodlines ignited anew. A sudden jolt struck Li Tiangang's heart as his gaze met the eyes of the composed young man Li Hao. In that silent clash of glances, memories buried for 14 years surged back like a flood. The once blurry figure who had tousled a child's head was now standing tall before him. Without a word, Li Tiangang leaped from atop his dragon lion beast, landing before the youth's red blood horse. The boy dismounted without hesitation because no son speaks to his father while on horseback. Power? The man's voice wavered, heavy with restrained emotion. Li Hao felt it too beneath the stiffness of reunion. Blood called to blood. Father, he replied. awkward but resolute, recognizing the bond that now anchored him to this world. In an instant, Li Tiangang wrapped his arms around him. 14 years of silence shattered in a single embrace. That strength, that warmth, Li Hao finally felt it. A true sense of home. He hesitated only a moment before embracing back, then whispered, "Where's mother?" The arms around him trembled, and the air thickened with unspoken sorrow. Li Hao's world shattered in an instant, his blood turning cold as his father's sorrowful words pierced through him. His mother was gone. The vibrant woman whose warm gaze lingered in his memories had vanished, leaving only a hollow silence. Amidst the grand celebration of the triumphant return, the cheers and praises of the crowd became distant echoes, unable to reach the weight crushing Li Hao's heart. Desperation surged as he questioned his father, disbelief gripping him like iron chain show. Could she have died? Why had no one told him? Why was grandmother silent? His father, lips trembling, confessed that the news had been sealed, buried in silence for months. Li Hao, once brimming with joy, now sat in cold numbness atop the dragon lion, the grandeur around him a mocking backdrop to his grief. As they returned to the Divine General Mansion, the truth settled in his bones in this day of glory. He had lost his mother forever. As twilight deepened and the last of the noble ladies departed, Li Xuanli lingered, reluctant to leave Tiangang's side, but his wife, perceptive and graceful, tugged him away with a quiet reproach. Their father and son not meddle where years of silence speak louder than comfort. Realizing her wisdom, Li Xuanli held her hand in grateful silence before turning homeward with his family. Left behind in the courtyard of dusk and shadows, Tiangang sat surrounded by loyal retainers and silent memories. As stories of the war in northern Yan spilled over the dinner table, young Li Hao learned the cost of glory, how demons once subdued had risen again, and even an empire at its peak was but a lion aging beneath its golden mane. Power had endured, but cracks now shimmered beneath the surface. When Li Hao asked about his mother, Tiangang's silence was heavier than any blade, his sorrow a quiet surrender. From now on, only you and I remain here. In that stillness, Li Hao understood his grief was no longer his alone. Their love, once spoken in youthful whispers, had echoed even to the edges of war. As the crimson sun dipped below the horizon, the evening's quiet was broken only by unspoken emotions. Li Xuanli hesitated, yearning to stay with Tiangang, but was tugged away by his wife, whose sharp whisper struck deeper than any sword. Why meddle in a reunion long overdue between father and son? In that fleeting moment, Xuanli grasped her wisdom, silently marveling at her strength as they disappeared into the dusk. Left behind, Li Tiangang stood beneath the silent sky, surrounded by old attendants and lingering shadows of northern Yan. As dinner wore on, young Li Hao listened silent, wide-eyed as whispers of the decade-long war and its demonic catalyst painted a grim truth. Dayu, mighty though it seemed, was no longer unshakable. Once a roaring lion, it now showed cracks in its golden mane. The border's ghost stirred, and the past clawed toward the present. When Li Hao asked about his mother, Tiangang's face darkened, words clipped by grief. From now on, only we remain. In that moment, Li Hao felt the weight of loss, not just as a son, but as an heir to pain, love, and an empire on the edge. The silence between father and son said more than any battle cry ever could. The air hung heavy as father and son faced each other after years apart. Li Hao, barely knowing his mother, and Li Tiangang, carrying over a decade of shared memories with her. When Li Hao quietly asked if her vengeance had been fulfilled, his father's slow nod spoke volumes. The silence that followed was not empty, it was filled with words left unsaid, pain buried beneath time. As Li Hao listened to tales of war and sacrifice, his resentment dissolved, replaced by a strange calm. Yet silence lingered, until Li Tiangang broke it with rare vulnerability, admitting his absence. Li Hao smiled, recounting warm memories with uncles and aunts, unaware that each word deepened the crease in his father's brow. At last, the truth slipped through. He had barely cultivated since unlocking his meridians. His father's disappointment was silent, but sharp. With a sigh, Li Tiangang dismissed him, watching his son leave. Then, his tone turned cold, eyes narrowing as he called out, "Where's Li Fu?" Beneath that quiet night, something darker stirred. The air hung heavy as father and son faced each other after years apart. Li Hao, barely knowing his mother, and Li Tiangang, carrying over a decade of shared memories with her. When Li Hao quietly asked if her vengeance had been fulfilled, his father's slow nod spoke volumes. The silence that followed was not empty, it was filled with words left unsaid, pain buried beneath time. As Li Hao listened to tales of war and sacrifice, his resentment dissolved, replaced by a strange calm. Yet silence lingered, until Li Tiangang broke it with rare vulnerability. Admitting his absence, Li Hao smiled, recounting warm memories with uncles and aunts, unaware that each word deepened the crease in his father's brow. At last, the truth slipped through. He had barely cultivated since unlocking his meridians. His father's disappointment was silent but sharp. With a sigh, Li Tiangang dismissed him, watching his son leave. Then, his tone turned cold, eyes narrowing as he called out, "Where's Li Fu?" Beneath that quiet night, something darker stirred. In the bustling city of Kangyu, Li Fu had been quietly guarding the young master at Tan Palace Academy under secret orders, but an unexpected injury forced him to stay behind and recover. Zhao, calm yet respectful, delivered the news to the legendary warrior Li Tiangang, who immediately tensed at the word injured, suspecting a hidden danger. But Zhao quickly reassured him there was no assassination attempt, only a cryptic promise from the young master about some great news upon his return. Confused, Li Tiangang pondered how good news could come from an injury, considering the distance from Kangyu City to their home a mere 2-day ride at full speed. Curious and concerned, he urged Zhao to recount the young master's journey over the years. Zhao, smiling, suggested he ask the young master directly, hinting at the stories and emotions waiting to surface. But Li Tiangang sighed, troubled by the carefree, unruly streak he had observed in his descendant, fearing that the absence of guidance had allowed him to grow wild. Zhao, however, gently defended the boy's nature. Carefree perhaps, but undoubtedly a good heart hidden beneath that untamed spirit. Li Tiangang's eyes dimmed as he dismissed Zhao with a flick of his hand, signaling a silent end to the conversation. Zhao hesitated only a moment before lowering his head and retreating into the shadows. Morning came lazily. Li Hao, no longer bound by academy duties, lingered in sleep beside the cold pond's lingering stillness, lost in dreams where warm eyes once cradled Haim only to be shattered by the encroaching growl of demons. "Young master!" A soft voice pierced the haze. He jolted awake, greeted by Yushuan's composed figure at his bed sitting attendant, brought back from war, lean and sharp-eyed. Li Hao blinked, his dream slipping away like mist. "When did you come in?" he asked, voice low. Yushuan offered a small smile. "The master requests your presence. Training awaits." And just like that, the echo of swords returned to Li Hao's life. The dream faded, duty did not. With a tightening brow, he commanded coldly, "From now on, don't enter without my permission." Yushuan bowed in silent obedience. The silence between them held no warmth, only the beginning of another chapter shaped not by choice, but by legacy. Li Tianggang's cold dismissal hung in the air as Zhao bowed and faded into the shadows. The next morning, Li Hao rose late. There was no urgency now. No summons from Tan Palace Academy, just the quiet weight of a father's return. Days blurred into idle sketches by the cold pond or quiet chess games with old Shen, but sleep offered no peace. Dreams, twisted into haunting illusion-stender eyes, a whisper of comfort, then the crushing tide of demons. "Young master!" the voice shattered the trance. Startled, Li Hao opened his eyes to find Yushuan, the sharp-eyed attendant from the battlefield, standing by his bed. Called to train in the front courtyard, Li Hao's leisure ended with a sigh. The dream's warmth, stolen. His voice turned cold. "Don't enter my room again without permission." Yushuan nodded. The past was gone. The trials were beginning. Wrapped in silken arrogance, Li Hao sat up at last, waving for fresh robes like a noble born under constellations of indulgence. Qingji moved swiftly, but it was Yushuan's still expression that mirrored the quiet disapproval. "The master is waiting," he finally said, cold and curt. Jolted by urgency, Li Hao dressed himself in haste, brushing off the earlier languor. Together they crossed the threshold, shadows trailing their steps until they neared the main house. A glance, a pause, and Li Hao vanished through the doorway like wind chasing a forgotten scent. Silence struck, his treasured calligraphy and paintings gone. A tremor rippled across his composed mask as he cried out, "Zhao!" The old servant appeared, hesitant, carrying truth like a blade behind his back. The master moved them to the woodshed. The word hung like ash in a funeral breeze. Woodshed, not a gallery, not a vault. Rage surged. Among those pieces were sketches of a mother whose face memory could no longer shape, now tossed like kindling. Eyes narrowing, fists clenched, Li Hao stood still, but inside, the fire had already started to burn. Li Tianggang's cold dismissal hung in the air as Zhao bowed and faded into the shadows. The next morning, Li Hao rose late. There was no urgency now. No summons from Tan Palace Academy, just the quiet weight of a father's return. Days blurred into idle sketches by the cold pond or quiet chess games with old Shen, but sleep offered no peace. Dreams, twisted into haunting illusion-stender eyes, a whisper of comfort, then the crushing tide of demons. "Young master!" the voice shattered the trance. Startled, Li Hao opened his eyes to find Yushuan, the sharp-eyed attendant from the battlefield, standing by his bed. Called to train in the front courtyard, Li Hao's leisure ended with a sigh. The dream's warmth, stolen. His voice turned cold. Don't enter my room again without permission. Yu Xuan nodded. The past was gone. The trials were beginning. Father, those paintings have... The words barely left Li Hao's mouth before they were crushed under the weight of his father's icy command. Apologize to Uncle Yu Xuan. Shock flared in his eyes. This wasn't the man he'd remembered, or maybe he'd never known him at all. Zhao tried to soften the blow. Speaking of Li Hao's passion, his years of silent dedication but was silenced in an instant. The storm behind Li Tiangang's eyes spoke louder than any scolding. Scrolls, chessboards, fishing rods, fragments of a wasted path scattered like fallen leaves. This wasn't just disappointment, it was judgment. In this hall, under the ancestral gaze of duty and pride, indulgence was treason. Everyone had let him stray, coddled him, perhaps out of fear or pity. But his father had returned, and with him came the sword of correction. Now, the word fell like a final strike, apologize. And in that moment, Li Hao stared into a face he could not recognize, a stranger cloaked in duty, a father shaped by expectation. Yesterday they had met, but had they ever truly seen each other? Beneath the sting of shame, a flicker of irony curled in Li Hao's chest. Blood made them family, but legacy? That was forged alone. Is this conversation helpful so far? Father, those paintings have... Li Hao's voice trembled as he tried to explain. But before the words could fully form, his father's sharp gaze cut him off. Apologize to Uncle Yu Xuan. Li Tiangang ordered coldly, his presence like a blade drawn under moonlight. Li Hao's breath caught. Was this truly the man he called father? Even Zhao, usually calm and composed, stepped in, trying to soften the moment. Young master was only distressed. Those scrolls, they mean everything to him. But his words were shattered by a single command. Silence. The chill in Li Tiangang's voice silenced not just Zhao, but the entire hall. Fury simmered behind his eyes, not just from the clutter of scrolls and fishing rods littering the house, but from the truth they whispered. Li Hao had abandoned the path of cultivation, lost in trivial pursuits. Everyone had indulged him servants, family, even the echoes of his mother's grace, but now the patriarch had returned, and with him, a storm. His gaze pierced Li Hao, not as a father seeing his son, but as a judge glimpsing a disappointment forged in silence. Now, apologize. The command landed like thunder. Li Hao, stunned, stared back at the man he thought he knew. Yet yesterday's memories felt distant, like dreams from another life. How much had he ever understood about this man who shared his blood? And how much did this man truly know of the boy standing before him, heart full of dust, yet eyes still seeking the sky? A letter? The question cut through the haze like a blade. Li Tiangang frowned Northern Yan. When? He hadn't seen it. Li Fu's realization struck him mid-thought. By the time he sent that message, his lord was already on the road home. The silence that followed the Battle of Kangyu City had weighed heavily. While recovering, Li Fu had pried into the tale, doubting it at first until Yue Shuhong confirmed it. Only then did he write not to home, but to Northern Yan. Good news of this magnitude wasn't for casual ears. It belonged first to those who had lived every heartbeat of worry. Li Hao's parents. The rest could wait. Now, with his lord standing before him, Li Fu's voice trembled with pride, eyes flashing. Young master has reached the 15 Li realm. Time seemed to freeze. In the courtyard's breathless stillness, the weight of that revelation shattered every doubt. Zhao's ancient eyes widened 15 Li. Yu Xuan and Li Tiangang were statues, stunned beyond words. Li Tiangang blinked, voice cracking with disbelief. Li Hao hadn't even formed a foundation yet. No blood melting, no fanfare. Li Fu only nodded, unable to suppress the joy. It was true. Did the second uncle forbid you to speak of it? Li Hao asked in return. Even if I told you, what could you have done? Could you have come back? Li Tiangang paused slightly, looking into the young man's calm, black eyes, and suddenly felt as if his heart had been pricked. But then, a wave of anger surged. At least your mother and I would have been happy for you. We would have asked your aunt to find a grandmaster to teach you. Li Hao said, a grandmaster? Isn't it enough to be taught by the second uncle? Are you still not satisfied with my cultivation level? Li Tiangang was taken aback, at a loss for words. Indeed, the second uncle at the Four Stands realm was also comparable to a grandmaster. But for the Li family descendants to take a grandmaster as a teacher, it wasn't just for learning, it was also an accumulation of connections for each generation. That way, when the older generation is gone, those favors might not be of much use to the next generation. Generation after generation, a millennium of heritage, connections are one of the great foundations. These connections might not be needed on a daily basis, but at critical moments, they could be a tremendous help. You're taking this too lightly. Li Tiangang shook his head, feeling that Li Hao was still naive and didn't argue with him further. In his heart, Li Hao retorted, "You are the one who is naive." Li Fu, watching this father and son, also noticed something amiss. How come it seemed that there was a sense of estrangement and a gap between the Lord and the young master? Did the second uncle forbid you to speak of it? Li Hao asked in return, "Even if I told you, what could you have done? Could you have come back?" Li Tiangang paused slightly, looking into the young man's calm, black eyes, and suddenly felt as if his heart had been pricked. But then, a wave of anger surged. "At least your mother and I would have been happy for you. We would have asked your aunt to find a grandmaster to teach you." Li Hao said, "A grandmaster? Isn't it enough to be taught by the second uncle? Are you still not satisfied with my cultivation level?" Li Tiangang was taken aback, at a loss for words. Indeed, the second uncle at the Four Stands realm was also comparable to a grandmaster. But for the Li family descendants to take a grandmaster as a teacher, it wasn't just for learning, it was also an accumulation of connections for each generation. That way, when the older generation is gone, those favors might not be of much use to the next generation. Generation after generation, a millennium of heritage, connections are one of the great foundations. These connections might not be needed on a daily basis, but at critical moments, they could be a tremendous help. You're taking this too lightly. At just 14, he had already stepped into the 15 Li realm, surpassing even legends before him. The old master's eyes gleamed as if the weight of decades had finally lifted. No longer would this talent be hidden away in shadows. "Let the world know," he declared with fire in his voice, "that the son of the Marquis is a genius, unseen in 1,000 years. The loyal servant, eyes brimming with long-suppressed tears, remembered every silent struggle, every spark of brilliance that once seemed wasted. Now, even the last crack in the mirror of fate had sealed Li Hao was whole. But before the servant could spread the news, Li Hao's voice cut through. "First, bring my paintings out of the firewood shed." A quiet defiance lingered in that request. The old master's joy faltered, replaced by a shadow of reproach. "Why waste time on trivial things?" he chided. But Li Hao's silence spoke louder. They would never understand what he built in secret was part of his path. Talent wasn't the only truth. Li Tiangang shook his head, feeling that Li Hao was still naive and didn't argue with him further. In his heart, Li Hao retorted, "You are the one who is naive." Li Fu, watching this father and son, also noticed something amiss. How come it seemed that there was a sense of estrangement and a gap between the Lord and the young master? "What if I did become the grandmaster you all want?" Li Hao's voice was calm, not defiant, but distant. The elder's eyes gleamed. "Then the world would shake. The Li clan would rise again. You'd be a once-in-a-millennium genius." But Li Hao only stared back, eyes like still water. And then what? The silence that followed was heavier than any praise. The elder spoke of provinces, cities, billions of lives geniuses as countless as river carps. Some make it, most don't. Even the brightest flames flicker. He recalled his uncle, an immortal at 19, praised across the lands. But that glory was brittle. The path only gets harder. Many blaze early, then vanish. Only a few carve their name into history. Li Hao understood it all. He said nothing more, turning instead to his trusted uncle with a quiet request. The elder's face darkened, his words had failed. Li Hao had already chosen. In Northern Yan, his voice rang with the authority of heaven and earth, a single word, and the ground itself trembled. "You're not allowed to go!" The command froze the air as Li Tiangang stepped forward, his eyes like steel, turning sharply to Li Hao. "As long as I breathe, you will stay away from those reckless pursuits. I've already said it, no matter how far you rise in cultivation, no matter if you eclipse even your 9th uncle, you will bow your head and apologize to Uncle Yuxuan." Yuxuan, ever calm, tried to soften the moment. "Let it be, Lord Hao. Hao heir is young and unknowing. I bear him no grudge." But Li Tiangang's voice cut through the room like thunder. "It cannot be let go." His gaze lashed out first at Zhao, then Li Fu before locking on his son, who stared back with a cold defiance. That expression, arrogant, distant, wasn't born in a day. "Because of your indulgence, he's grown insolent," he roared. So what if he's talented in cultivation? The Li family has no shortage of geniuses. But if he won't respect his elders, what future does he have? Zhao's breath caught. Li Fu's face paled. None had expected Lord Hu's wrath to erupt so fiercely. And as Li Fu struggled to defend the boy, pointing to his dedication and strength, Li Tiangang's fury only deepened. "Silence!" The word struck harder than any blade. In war and in family, he had no patience for weakness, cloaked as mercy. Li Fu's breath hitched as he lowered his head. The air around Lord Hu no longer the warm figure of Li Tiangang, but the unyielding commander of martial discipline crackled with silent pressure. Zhao, caught in the tension, dared not speak, only casting a worried glance at Li Hao. But Li Hao stood quiet, facing that cold, unblinking gaze. For 14 years, he had stared at the stars alone, dreaming of recognition, and now that moment had come, but joy was absent. Just yesterday, the world still seemed whole. Drawing a long breath, Li Hao pushed down the ache in his chest and spoke with the calm of someone far too young to carry such weight. He only followed orders. I shouldn't have lost control. Yuxuan blinked, surprised by the composure in Li Hao's voice. But Li Tiangang's fury reignited like a wildfire, his glare sharp enough to cut. So I'm the one to blame? You still want to scream at your father to leave? The weight of that name father hung in the air like chains. Li Hao's fist tightened, then loosened. His gaze drifted not up, not forward, but to the weeds by the stone steps, stubborn and overlooked. A bitter smile touched his lips. Have you ever seen my paintings? Of course not. You said my mother left. I barely remember, so I painted her while I still could. His voice rang out, crisp, clear-cutting through silence like a blade. And in that moment, something inside the iron-willed general faltered. His body trembled, because those paintings, they were of Qing. He never cared for those old scrolls until now. By the time I learned to paint, I had already forgotten what my mother looked like. Only her eyes remained. Li Hao's voice, low and distant, echoed like a brushstroke on fading parchment. He stared at the wind-stirred weeds, lost in a memory too fragile to hold. I tried to paint her, but it was just a shadow. I waited for her return to paint her truly, but she never came back. Silence fell like dust in the courtyard. Even the stern Li Tiangang tightened his fist in his sleeve. Li Hao looked back at his father, eyes calm, yet sharp. You say a grandmaster cannot be insulted, but can my mother? His question wasn't loud, but it struck like a blade to the heart. The atmosphere cracked. Even the cold Yuxuan looked away. As the young man turned to leave, his voice dropped like a seal. Do with those scrolls whatever you want. His back faced them, yet his silence screamed rebellion. Stop! Roared his father, but the boy didn't flinch. Li Tiangang stood frozen. This was the first time someone had disobeyed him, and it was his own son. Anyone else would have been crushed. But Li Hao's words had left him powerless, a giant trembling beneath invisible weight. Master! The young master! Zhao dared to speak. A raised hand silenced him. Move the paintings. Prepare the cleanest room. If any are damaged martial law. The command rang out, but Li Hao was already gone, and the wind carried nothing back. Zhao froze for a moment, then gave a breath of relief and nodded without hesitation. Li Tiangang, voice rising with pride, ordered Li Fu to inform the family of Hauer's breakthrough in the 15th. Li Realmhe wanted a banquet, a celebration grand enough to shake the world. As Li Fu rushed off, grateful for the change in mood, Yuxuan hesitated beside the marshal. His tone was careful, suggesting that such a cold confrontation with his son so soon after returning might wound their bond. Li Tiangang, stubborn yet vaguely remorseful, brushed it off but agreed to visit later. His anger still simmered as he recalled the boy's dismissive words about the painting of his late wife, Qing. That alone ignited fury. How dare Li Hao toss aside what should be sacred? Yet as Yuxuan faltered in reply, too lowly to advise on matters of blood, a streak flashed across the sky. Li Tiangang looked up, eyes softening at the arrival it was his second uncle. A moment of pause. A breath held, and the marshal stepped forward, smiling, to meet the one man who might still carry answers from the old world. Just as the words "I was about to thank you" left his lips, Li Mushu dropped into the courtyard, eyes narrowing at the hardened figure before him. You rascal, he muttered, voice tinged with a strange mix of pride and regret. The borderlands have carved you into stone. Where's Qing? Li Tiangang's silence was louder than any battle cry. She's gone. The words struck the air like a shattered talisman. Gone? Li Muxiu's voice tightened. Is she coming back? But the hesitation in his nephew's eyes betrayed the truth. You really thought you could hide it? Your parents knew. How else could the marriage have happened? The revelation hit Li Tiangang like a soul-binding blow. His sturdy form trembled as old truths cracked open inside him. Li Muxiu sealed the courtyard with a flick of his hand, his gaze piercing. Tell me now, will she return? Clenched fists, a slow shake of the head. She won't. A silence heavier than steel hung between them. Then, like a blade catching light, Li Mushu asked, Did the others find out? Hauer? But Li Tiangang's answer was yet another shadow. Number everyone thinks she's... The unspoken word dangled in the air. Hauer doesn't know? In the quiet aftermath of countless battles, Li Mushu's voice cut through the tension like a blade, questioning with a knowing edge. Li Tiangang gave only the slightest nod, and silence hung heavy between them. A breath passed, then Li Mushu exhaled, grim and resigned, declaring that it was better for Hauer to remain in the dark, to consider Qing lost to the world, a name buried like ash in the wind. At those words, Tiangang's frame stiffened, fists clenched tight. yet he swallowed his anguish whole. But the silence was short-lived. Mushu's gaze sharpened. The war in northern Yan wasn't because of her, was it? A slow shake of the head followed, the truth bitter. Years of war had drained even the holy palace dry. Mushu scoffed, fury simmering. Once Howard takes the true dragon seat, I'll face those demon kings myself. Tiangang tried to deflect, reminding his uncle that the family still needed his vigilance. With a tired smile, he shifted the topic to gratitude. But Mushu waved it off with a snort, taking care of Hao. Wasn't a favor, it was duty. Of all the next generation, Howard was the only one worth the sword on, like the rest. Fools to the bone, himself included. Li Tiangang, hearing the implied criticism, could only sigh inwardly. His pride bruised, but his tongue held still. He recalled the days when he and his brothers were little more than shadows under the family Nam ignored, belittled, forgotten by their second uncle. Yet somehow, Li Hao, that quiet boy with eyes like still water, had melted the old man's heart. With a strained smile, he said, "If not for second uncle's gift that defied the heavens, Hao would never have climbed so high. I owe him a debt beyond words." But the words sparked confusion. "What?" gasped Li Mushu. A chance against heaven's will for him? Even Yu Xuan, who rarely let emotions surface, showed surprise. Li Tiangang tried to explain, voice rising with conviction. Howard's only 14 and already at 15 Li realm without that chance. But Mushu cut him off sharply. "You misunderstand. I used my heavenly chance long ago. Whatever Howard is, it's not because of me." His voice lowered, almost reverent. "That boy's talent is unnatural. Even your ninth brother can't compare. Intervening might have shattered him." Li Tiangang, a man tempered by war and duty, stood dumbstruck. For the first time in many years, he felt the ripple of something he'd forgotten all. Not the second uncle. Yu Xuan's heart froze. That kind of talent? Li Hao achieved it on his own? Even the old master's face cracked with disbelief, eyes flickering toward the boy like witnessing a legend unfold. In a clan where prodigies sprout like bamboo after rain, Li Hao stood alone, untouchable, unmatched. Hao isn't just gifted, Li Mushu said softly, eyes gleaming with pride. He's something this family has never seen. Li Tiangang's breath caught the sun. With sealed meridians? That couldn't be wrong, could it? But there was no lie here, no smokescreen. "It was a dream," Mushu whispered. "A dream that shattered the chains. His meridians weren't truly blocked, just asleep." And just like that, a boy once bound by fate awakened a storm. Even a battlefield-hardened general like Tiangang could only gape because this wasn't a tale of bloodline or blessing. It was the rise of something far rarer. A dragon that forged itself in silence. Do you like this personality? Started at 6 or 7? No foundation establishment, no blood-melting Gan, yet in just 7 years he reached the 15 Li realm and he wasn't even serious about cultivation? Just a lazy boy who played around, barely trained, and still soared beyond the reach of gifted clansmen? Terrifying doesn't even begin to cover it. His own father, Li Tiangang, once thought his ninth brother was the peak of talent, only to realize that his own Sanye's, his son, was something far beyond. The trembling in his limbs betrayed the storm inside. Even Yu Xuan, tongue-tied and wide-eyed, couldn't believe the idle young master held such terrifying power. Watching them, Li Mushu smirked, basking in their awe like one who's already glimpsed the stars. Why should shock belong only to him, Feng, and the fifth brother? "Where is Howard?" he asked, scanning the courtyard. "Probably still in his room," Li Tiangang answered, voice still thick with awe. Li Mushu's smile faded, seriousness returning. "I came to see you, yes, but I leave Howard to you now." "I can't rest unless I know someone is watching." Li Tiangang laughed. "He hardly needs watching. He's strong enough to roam the Jianghu." But Li Mushu cut through that laugh with a glance heavy as thunder. "He's 14. His voice dropped. "When I said watch him, I didn't mean protect him from others. I meant don't let him walk this path alone." The courtyard grew silent. So did Li Tiangang. Is it companionship? The question echoed in Li Tiangang's mind like a blade drawn too late. He recalled the boy's quiet words, each one a challenge, a cry buried in silence. "If I chase greatness, will you look at me then? If I become the genius of this age, will that earn me your presence?" The weight of 14 winters in northern Yan settled heavily on the old warrior's shoulders. He had wielded spears, but never held his son. Guilt bloomed like frost in spring. "I understand," he murmured to his brother, a vow forming in silence. "I'll be there from now on." But the wind moved on, as did Li Mushu, speaking cryptically of rain and fading ties. Back in the quiet of his courtyard, Li Hao was greeted not by answers, but by Xiao Ru, the white fox who said nothing, only nestled deeper into his arm. In that wordless embrace, Li Hao smiled at a boy seeking warmth not from stars or swords, but from something far more fleeting, the feeling of being seen. Is this conversation helpful so far? Li Hao absent-mindedly toyed with a chess piece as the white fox nestled on his lap, his gaze drifting out the window in lazy contemplation until a shadow flashed past. Startled, he turned just in time to see Li Mushu land with practiced ease. "What are you doing here, lad? Didn't the fifth brother come to play chess?" Li Hao blinked, then grinned. "Second grandfather, if you're free, let's go dragon fishing." Mushu scoffed. "Catch what dragon? That last one was dumb luck. You should be with your father, he's finally back." But Li Hao only chuckled, his eyes gleaming with quiet defiance. "Last time was luck. Next time, it'll be skill." Mushu's frown deepened. "Don't go alone. There's still an old dragon beneath that lake. You may be at 15 li, but that won't save you from foolishness." Li Hao nodded with a smirk, the kind that hinted he'd go anyway. Far away, in the eternal spring court, a teacup shattered, He Jianlan stood frozen, eyes wide. "Say that again," she whispered, the name she just heard clawing open, a wound long sealed. In the hushed stillness of the eternal spring court, Li Fu's calm words struck like thunder. Young master Hao had stepped into the 15 li realm. At only 14, the boy they once pitied had shattered illusions spun over years. He, Jianlan, long deceived, stood frozen as realization crashed through her like lightning. Her son's hidden strength, his cultivation, his terrifying talent that had all been veiled, not by fate, but by Li Tiangang's secretive will. Rage, awe, and joy surged within her, yet the truth burned brighter. Hao was no weak child, but a dragon forged in silence. The maids stood breathless, the past crumbling in their minds. Even Suijin, who once led him by the hand to the listening rain tower, now saw him not as a burden, but a shadow genius hiding in plain sight. From the ashes of pity rose, Li Hao had always walked the path of power, just in silence. 14 years old and already at the 15 li realm, that revelation alone cracked the calm of the entire Li family like thunder. No one could believe it, not the grizzled instructors, not the cousins training in the courtyard, not even the ones who once mocked his name. A boy once dismissed, now standing above them all. And yet, he wore that power like a shadow, silent, steady, terrifying in its stillness. Even he, Jianlan, sharp as ever, was shaken by how perfectly he had hidden it. Her voice cut through the air like a blade. "I understand. You may go now tell Li Tiangang. I'll deal with him later." Beside her, Li Fu's sheepish compassion felt like theater, as if he too had played his part knowing full well what would come. Rumors swirled fast, fluttering like banners in a storm. A banquet in eternal spring court. The official word that Li Hao had stepped into the realm most couldn't touch for decades. And as the whispers turned to roars, one truth emerged like a blade from the sheath. This wasn't just talent, it was destiny calling. And it spoke not with fire, but with silence. Is this the terrifying nature of true prodigies? In the quiet elegance of the Shuihua courtyard, Lu Yue Rong, graceful despite the years, admired her reflection every line, a testament to refined beauty and poise. A hairpin shimmered as her maid carefully adorned her bun, the moment peaceful until a hushed message shattered it. A maid from the Eternal Spring Court brought unexpected news. The family banquet was to honor Li Hao's breakthrough into the 15 li realm. Her mirror smile froze, her head snapped around in disbelief, and a jeweled pin struck her brow from the sudden motion. "Li Hao?" she echoed, stunned. The name rang like thunder in her ears. That child? That quiet shadow? Could he have reached such a realm already? Her vision swam, her breath caught not from age or illness, but the seismic realization that something had changed. Tremendously. Is this conversation helpful so far? As realization struck her like a bolt of lightning, the chaos of doubts and inconsistencies finally aligned into one terrifying truth. Li Hao had never been crippled at all. Her breath caught, but she masked the storm in her chest with a smile, sending the maid away before summoning her trusted housekeeper. When the truth returned with certainty, Lu Yue Rong's expression twisted in disbelief. So this was all a farce foundation, establishment failure, the pitiful facade, all lies orchestrated with eerie precision. And if it wasn't Li Hao's mind behind it, it had to be that strange woman, cold and calculating, willing to fake even a life-draining ritual. Eyes burning, Lu Yue Rong penned a secret warning to Qian Feng, desperate to expose the truth before it shattered their standing. But the tremors didn't stop with her. The entire court reeled in shock, even more than when Li Junye broke through to the Grandmaster realm at 17. After all, Li Hao had always seemed detached from cultivation, sketching beside rivers, idle beside his uncle, a boy too serene to be dangerous. And yet now, beneath that quiet mask, a storm had always been brewing. They thought he was nothing, just a late bloomer with poor roots, a name on a list thanks to someone else's pity. No one asked about his realm. because the answer seemed obvious. But then, the truth hit like thunder in clear skies. In Piaksu courtyard, jaws dropped. They believed he had barely crossed the soul succession threshold, but Li Hao had already vanished far beyond, into realms they couldn't even comprehend. A day earlier, Li Wushuang had felt the sting of his 15 Li realm strike, yet still, she didn't grasp the full weight of it. Now, even the brightest among them seemed dim in his shadow. At just 14, he stood where 16-year-olds dared not tread. The so-called exception to the black and white hall wasn't favoritism, it was foresight. As whispers spread, frustration flared. So those old relics at the academy knew before we did? Li Xuanli growled, stunned. Gao Qingqing, ever sharp, pieced it together. During past missions, he must have shown them. But why weren't they told? Because the academy must have assumed naively that the Li family already understood what they had. They didn't. Not until now. They tried to hide his brilliance, but the silence only made it louder. While the noble families whispered and watched, the return of Haochild to the frontier, unseen for 14 years, rattled the balance of power. Now his name spreads like wildfire through the Li household, from stone courtyards to smoky kitchens, his legend growing with every retelling. But glory draws shadows. The Qian Kun list, a symbol of genius for the human race, is also the target board of the demons. His family fears, his name protected yet exposed. And his daughters are warned, and fathers grow quiet. The truth becomes clear. In a world ruled by legacy and blade, fame is both a crown and a curse. And under the veil of celebration, something ancient stirs a storm wrapped in silence, waiting to fall. Whispers rose like ghosts from the heart of the Li residence, slipping beyond stone walls and gilded thresholds, darting through alleyways and veiled strongholds until even the hidden sex of Qingzhou trembled he had returned. The fallen heir of the Li family, lost for 14 years, now re-emerged not as a boy, but as a storm cloaked in silence. Power flowed from his presence like a tide, and across the land, eyes once indifferent turned sharp with fear and awe. Amid the quiet jubilation of the family estate, Li Hao stood before an old door, paintings within, untouched by time. Zhao's voice trailed behind him like an old melody, speaking of loyalty, of war, of a bond between master and orphan that defied judgment. But Li Hao, though born of blood, felt the cold truth settle. Hadn't he too walked this life like an orphan, shaped more by absence than by love? He said nothing. Not because he accepted, but because he no longer fought the ache. This was the price of being the one they had waited for, the father of this legacy. And when Zhao spoke of names and glory, of how the world would no longer look down on him, Li Hao only smiled, voice low, eyes distant. Didn't the world already know my name the moment I was born? Zhao froze for a heartbeat, then nodded slowly. The truth could no longer be denied. Li Hao, once the fallen heir of the Li clan, had been named the True Dragon by none other than Emperor Yu himself. Yet Zhao chuckled awkwardly, brushing off the weight of history after all. Back then, Li Hao was just an infant lost in the shadows of a legendary elder brother. That's why everything passes, Li Hao said calmly, his voice soft as moonlight. Even saints are dust beneath the sweep of time. With that, he turned away, stepping into the night where starlight spilled into an empty courtyard, cold and clear beside the lantern, lit festivities beyond. Let's go, he murmured, the silence behind his words louder than any roar. Zhao exhaled in quiet relief, his mission complete. The banquet swelled with life as Li Hao entered, drawing every eye. At the table of the main line's third generation, tension crackled. The absent heirs meant little. What mattered was here, now. Li Wushuang, Li Jiangying, Li Ruminon could hide the shift. Li Yuanzhao lit up, thrilled by the awe on their faces, stealing a glance at Li Yun with undisguised pride. But Li Yun and Li Jining were elsewhere, their gazes distant, haunted by the echoes of another returnierly similar, yet heavier in silence. And then a mutter, sharp with envy. Just the 15 Li realm. But in that quiet defiance, Li Hao stood still unmoved, unreadable, like a blade buried deep in stone, waiting. Is this conversation helpful so far? What's so great about that? It's only when you step into the realm of a grandmaster that you really have something to brag about, Li Ruming scoffed, her voice slicing through the banquet like a cold blade. The air shifted. Li Wanzhao turned, face tightening as he recognized Hera's shadow from childhood. One half of Lady 8's aloof duo, always wrapped in an air of superiority. They were untouchable, twins orbiting in their own silent world, never speaking more than a handful of words to the rest. He remembered the practice field, the blood, the sound of a bone breaking Lady 8's justice swift and cruel when one of her cherished ones was hurt. That memory still clung to him, the silent screams, the pleading mother. Now, Rumeng dared to mock. His lips curled into a sneer. Nothing to be proud of? Then tell me, 16 and 15, what level have you reached? The room held its breath, the clash of pride and lineage echoing louder than steel. Biased? That's what you call it when someone outpaces you? Li Yuanjiao's mockery hit a nerve, and Li Ruming flared like a match to dry straw. Her voice dripped venom. He clings to second uncle like a shadow. If he's stronger, it's only because of favoritism. But Yuanjiao snapped back. Then why not you? Why didn't he favor you? Ruming scoffed, icy as frostbite. Because he's sly, and his words drip honey. We aren't so manipulative. Glares flew like daggers. From the side, Li Yun and his sister kept their distance, wary of conflict but clearly disgusted. Li Wushuang broke the tension like a whip crack. All that bark, yet no bite. How shameful jealousy suits none of us. Yuanjiao blinked in shock. Wushuang defending him? Strange, considering Hao had once defeated her. Rumeng hissed, "Who are you calling talentless?" Wushuang's gaze cut like steel. "Whoever whines the loudest. You, who just scraped into Soul Succession, mocking a 15 Li realm, what pride can you even stand on?" Silence, and then shock. Soul Succession? Eyes widened. They trained together, shared the same blood, yet they lagged behind. The winds of legacy were shifting and not in their favor. It really is nothing special, Li Zhengying sneered, eyes cold as frost while his sister fumed behind him, their arrogance barely veiled. Li Wushuang, don't think the divine travel realm makes you invincible. Those in the heavenly human realm and beyond see you as dust beneath their feet. Talk again when you've crossed that threshold. But Li Wushuang's gaze sharpened like drawn steel. You dare speak my name without respect? Have you forgotten how to address your own kind, or did your mother teach you to be a stray dog in court? That threshold? I'll cross it far before you crawl to it. Speak to me when you've at least stepped onto the path I now tread, Li Rumeng snarled, unable to hold back. Oh please, you only shine because you cling to a powerful teacher. We just didn't beg for favors. Li Wushuang laughed, not out of joy but rising fury, but before words could slice deeper, Li Yun caught her arm. Don't waste breath on mud, he muttered, voice dripping with sarcasm. They'll just drag mother into this to settle old scores. Li Zhengying's eyes flared. What did you say? But Li Yuanjiao's voice cut in, ice cold. Silence. This is the mountain and river courtyard, not your Mo River trash heap. Even your mother bows to Tiangang here. The siblings froze, pride bruised by reality. Though their temper burned, they didn't dare fan the flames here. Li Wushuang rolled her eyes and turned away with a smirk, uninterested in bickering with wolves in borrowed robeshet inwardly. She found it absurd that 8th Aunt's children had grown so crude, as if their lineage alone gave them license to bark in noble halls. As Li Hao strode calmly past the younger ones toward the circle of probing aunties, Li Jining frowned in confusion, only to hear Li Yuanjiao chuckle, Brother Hao doesn't sit at the kids' table. At that moment, Li Tiangang was enduring a relentless barrage of questions. Why had he hidden Li Hao's cultivation level? Who guided him? How could such progress be possible? To him, the battlefield's fury was less terrifying than the sharp tongues of these women. Yet he kept his composure, forced to admit there was no explanation beyond innate talent, a claim none truly believed. The sudden surge of Li Hao's power, his closeness to certain uncles, and the timing of his breakthrough fed silent suspicions of fate-defying methods. As Li Hao arrived, the aunts swarmed him next, trying to unearth secrets from the younger mouth, but his silence was even more impenetrable than his father's. Nearby, Liu Yerong's eyes burned with frustration, cursing both father and son. Far to the south, within the windswept sword cottage, disciples burst in with news that stunned the master mid-scroll 15 Li realm. Could it be the boy from 8 years past, the old-souled child in that empty courtyard, once dismissed, now standing on the edge of legend? 14 years old, just a few moons older than Shu'er yet, already a full realm ahead. Whispers rippled through the sect like wildfire. Jian Wudao's gaze sharpened, no longer calm. That level of talentno, defiance of fate, eclipsed even the brightest of the past. A new true dragon? The Li clan was rising again, favored by the heavens. Disciples once proud now stood silent, their egos shattered. Master, one asked, you nearly took him in, didn't you? Jian Wudao nodded faintly, lost in the memory. Once called a cripple, now ascending like a star. They must have hidden him, he muttered, or twisted fate itself. But he shook his head. Even so, he wouldn't belong to us. Why? They asked. His voice was like drawn steel. He is not of the sword Dao. His path is different. Silence followed reverent, uneasy. A monster walks among them, but not beside them. A dragon born in silence, not flame. What a shame. Having a monster like that as a fellow disciple would have been terrifyingly motivating, someone chuckled, while another nodded, eyes still lingering on the youth. 14, already at the 15 Li realm. That's just monstrous. Jian Wudao's gaze swept over them, sharp as a blade. I always told you there's always someone stronger. Now you see? You've got talent, sure, but if you dream of suppressing an entire era, 60 years worth? Not yet. Go hone your sword. A few disciples exchange bitter smile show. Could one truly overshadow 6 decades of heroes? Then, as if remembering something, Jian Wudao asked, has Xuer already descended the mountain? One of the younger disciples, handsome and carefree, responded, she broke into the divine travel realm and left immediately, said she was heading back to the mansion. Jian Wudao's expression shifted, a faint crease of worry between his brows. She owes the Li family too much. I just hope she can cut ties cleanly this time. The sword path and the mortal world one always must be left behind. The next day, far away in the heart of Yuzhou's imperial city, the aftermath of the Li family banquet echoed within a palace older than kingdoms. There, among dragon-scaled carpets and thousand-year-old silence, power gathered beneath heaven's eye, from supreme generals to low-ranked governors. Even those whose mere breath could shake 10 cities stood humbled, heads bowed, as the weight of lineage, legacy, and silence loomed unseen, but ever felt. Amidst the solemnity of the imperial court, the ministers bowed deeply as news of a divine awakening echoed through the hall. A new celestial prodigy had emerged from the Li family of Qingzhou. The emperor, cloaked in the black robe of 9 dragons, sat high on the dragon throne, his fiery eyes scanning the crowd as a rare smile flickered across his face. Whispers confirmed the youth's identity. Li Hao, once blessed by the emperor himself 14 years ago, now hailed as a Qilin star reborn. As voices rose in reverent acclaim, linking him to the fallen hero who once sealed the demon scourge, the throne room pulsed with fate's weight. Gazing toward the east, toward Qingzhou, the emperor seemed to see not just a child grown, but destiny itself stirred awake. Yet, amid celebration, a lone voice rose with accusation, condemning the Li family's silence. The air tightened. All eyes turned to Lord Helion. The palace hushed once more, not from awe, but from the shadows beneath Legacy's light. Do you like this personality? In the austere court of Qingzhou, beneath veiled politeness and simmering tension, the ancient alliance between noble houses shows its crack. While the Wang and Li families intertwine through marriage, the Helion clan watches with quiet scorn. As murmurs rise over the concealed cultivation of Li Hao, a young heir long hidden in shadow, a seasoned general defends the secrecy as a shield against old enemies and vengeful demons. But Helion Boya's cold retort slices through the era. The Divine General Mansion cannot protect its own. What loyalty remains? The court trembles as power and prestige clash in veiled accusations and rigid hierarchies. In the end, even reason is wielded like a blade. Li Hao, now reaching the 15 Li realm, walks the path of strength alone. His fate a sharp edge balanced between scrutiny and legacy. The officials held their breath, masked behind calm eyes, as the Lord once again pointed fingers with hollow accusations. Familiar, habitual, absurd. The crowd had long accepted these jabs as part of the court's theater. Since the fall of the Li family's true dragon 14 years ago, a wound that silenced even the mighty Helion clan, every rise of the Li name had drawn whispers and opposition. And now, even as General Xingwu returned drenched in glory, having shattered demon lines and turned back the Holy Palace's storm, Lord Helion's scrutiny cut deep, dragging up logistical wear and campaign length as if victory were a sin. For years, the Helion-backed ministers had chipped away at the marshal's name with veiled slanders and failed impeachments, a luxury only they could afford. Anyone else would have been dust on the executioner's blade. But the Helion clan, drenched in battlefield blood, cities red beneath their sacrifice, were untouchable. Their feud with the Li family was a public fire no rain could douse. And as murmurs rippled through the ranks of officials, many dared not speak, but all thought the same. Lord Boya's attack was reckless, almost childish. A man like Xingwu could crush rebellions with one hand. This petty noise wouldn't even touch his shadow.